Most people believe their lives are controlled by circumstances. They blame the people around them, their childhood, their failures, their enemies, their lack of opportunity. They look at the world and say, this is why I am the way I am. But the truth is far more uncomfortable. Your life is not shaped only by what happens to you. It is shaped by the meaning you give to what happens to you. The mind produces thoughts constantly. Some arrive as memories, some as fears, some as predictions, and some as reactions to the world around you. But the greatest mistake you can make is assuming that every thought deserves your belief simply because it appeared inside your head. A thought can feel powerful and still be completely wrong. It can sound convincing because it is familiar. It can feel true because you have repeated it for years. But familiarity is not truth, and emotion is not evidence. Many people live as prisoners of their own thoughts without realizing it. They wake up with a thought such as, I am already behind, and immediately feel defeated. They think nobody respects me and begin interpreting every conversation as proof. They think, I will fail, and suddenly their body reacts as if failure has already happened. The thought appears first, but the mind quickly builds an entire emotional world around it. The person does not stop to question the thought. They simply obey it. This is how a thought becomes a belief becomes an emotion, and an emotion begins to influence behavior. Eventually, the person behaves in a way that creates evidence for the original thought. Someone who believes they are unworthy may avoid opportunities, remain silent, accept poor treatment, and refuse to take risks. Later, they look at their life and say, see, I was right. But the belief helped create the reality it feared. The first step toward controlling your mind is learning to create distance between yourself and your thoughts. Instead of saying, I am afraid, learn to say, I am experiencing fear. Instead of saying, I am a failure, say, I have experienced failure. Instead of saying, I cannot do this, ask, what is making me believe I cannot do this? The difference may seem small, but psychologically, it is enormous. When you identify completely with a thought, the thought controls you. When you observe the thought, you create space between the impulse and the decision. Imagine someone criticizes you. Your first reaction may be anger. The mind immediately begins producing explanations. They are trying to humiliate me. They think they are better than me. I need to defend myself. Within seconds, a simple statement becomes a personal war. But what if you paused? What if you examined the thought instead of accepting it? Is the criticism actually true? Is the person trying to help, provoke, or simply express an opinion? Does responding improve your position, or does your emotional reaction give the other person control over you? This does not mean you should believe every criticism. It means you should not automatically reject every criticism either. The disciplined mind does not ask, do I like this thought? It asks, is this thought useful and accurate? Sometimes the thought you want to reject contains a lesson. Sometimes the thought you desperately want to believe is nothing more than an excuse. Your mind will produce fear whenever you attempt something uncertain. It will tell you that you are not ready. It will remind you of every past mistake. It will present the worst possible outcome as if it were a prediction. But fear is not prophecy. Anxiety is not knowledge. Doubt is not proof of incapability. These are mental experiences, not commands that you must obey. You must become an investigator of your own mind. When a thought appears, question it. Where did it come from? Is it based on fact or assumption? Does it belong to the present, or is it an old wound repeating itself? Is this your own conclusion, or something someone else taught you to believe? The more honestly you examine your thoughts, the less power unconscious beliefs have over you. You do not need to eliminate negative thoughts. That is impossible. Even the strongest mind experiences doubt, fear, anger, and insecurity. The difference is that a strong mind does not allow every thought to become a command. It watches the thought, studies it, and decides whether it deserves attention. A thought enters your mind. You do not have to invite it to stay. You do not have to build an identity around it. You do not have to turn it into a decision. You can simply observe it and ask whether it deserves the power you are about to give it. Your attention is one of the most valuable forms of power you possess, yet most people give it away without realizing what they are doing. They allow strangers, social media, gossip, criticism, entertainment, fear, and meaningless conflict to decide what occupies their mind. Then they wonder why they feel distracted, anxious, exhausted, and unable to focus on the life they claim they want. The problem is not always a lack of time. Often it is a lack of control over attention. Where your attention goes, your mind follows. And where your mind repeatedly goes, your emotions begin to follow. If you spend hours focusing on what you lack, you will begin to feel poor even when your life contains many things to be grateful for. If you constantly watch people who appear more successful, attractive, wealthy, or powerful, your mind will begin comparing your private reality to their carefully displayed image. If you repeatedly focus on the person who rejected you, that person may occupy more space in your mind than the people who actually value you. This is how people become psychologically controlled by things they claim not to care about. They say they do not care about someone, yet they check that person's profile every day. They say they are not affected by criticism, yet they replay one sentence for weeks. They claim to be focused on success, yet they spend hours consuming distractions that leave them with no energy to pursue their goals. Their words say one thing, but their attention reveals the truth. Your attention is a form of currency. Every day you have a limited amount of mental energy. When you spend it on meaningless arguments, you have less available for your ambitions. When you spend it on comparison, you have less available for self-improvement. When you spend it on resentment, you have less available for building the future. The person who constantly gives attention to distractions eventually discovers that there is nothing left for the things that matter. The world is designed to compete for your attention. Every notification is asking you to look. Every controversy is asking you to react. Every advertisement is trying to create a desire. Every insult is an invitation to lose control. Every dramatic story is designed to pull your emotions in a particular direction. If you are not conscious of this, you will become mentally occupied by things that have no real importance in your life. A disciplined person learns to ask a simple question. Is this worthy of my attention? Not everything deserves a response. Not every opinion deserves analysis. Not every person deserves access to your emotions. Not every problem deserves to be carried all day. The fact that something is loud does not mean it is important. The fact that someone demands your attention does not mean they have earned it. You must become selective with what you allow to occupy your mind. This does not mean ignoring reality or becoming indifferent to the world. It means understanding that attention is limited and every decision about where to place it has a cost. If you spend your attention on the past, you may neglect the present. If you spend it on fear, you may miss opportunity. If you spend it on other people's lives, you may abandon your own. Notice how your mind behaves when you are constantly exposed to negativity. You begin to expect betrayal. You become suspicious of opportunity. You interpret neutral events as threats. The world may not have changed, but your attention has trained your mind to search for danger. The same principle works in the opposite direction. When you focus on learning, solutions, discipline, and possibility, your mind becomes more skilled at finding those things. This is why controlling your attention is not merely a productivity technique. It is a form of psychological self-defense. You must protect your mind from becoming a storage room for every opinion, insult, fear, and distraction that passes through your environment. A person who controls your attention can influence your emotions. A person who influences your emotions can influence your decisions. And a person who influences your decisions can influence the direction of your life. The next time you feel mentally overwhelmed, examine what has been occupying your attention. Ask yourself what you have been watching, reading, thinking about, and repeatedly revisiting. You may discover that your exhaustion is not coming from the work you are doing, but from the unnecessary battles you are carrying in your mind. You may discover that the person you cannot stop thinking about has become powerful only because you continue to give them your attention. You may discover that the problem consuming your thoughts is not even a problem you can control. Take your attention back. Do not allow every person to enter your mind and rearrange the furniture. Do not allow every event to determine your emotional state. Do not allow every distraction to steal pieces of your future. The moment you become selective about what deserves your focus, you begin to recover a form of power that most people surrender every day without even realizing it. The quality of your life is deeply connected to the quality of the questions you ask yourself. Most people do not realize that their mind is constantly searching for answers. Give it a question and it begins looking for evidence. The problem is that many people ask questions that make them weaker. They ask, why does this always happen to me? Why am I so unlucky? Why does nobody respect me? Why am I behind everyone else? These questions may appear to be honest, but they often trap the mind inside a cycle of helplessness. Once you ask the question, your mind begins searching for evidence that confirms the problem. If you ask, why does everyone treat me badly? Your mind will remember every insult, rejection, and disappointment. It will ignore the people who treated you well because the question has already instructed your attention to search for proof of mistreatment. If you ask, why am I always failing? Your mind will collect every mistake you have made and place them together as evidence of a permanent identity. The question creates the direction of your thinking, and the direction of your thinking influences the reality you experience. This is why changing your questions can change your life. You may not be able to control everything that happens to you, but you can control the questions that follow the event. Instead of asking, why did this happen to me? Ask, what can I learn from what happened? Instead of asking, why did they betray me? Ask, what did I fail to notice about their character? Instead of asking, why am I so far behind? Ask, what skill do I need to develop to move forward? Instead of asking, why do I keep making the same mistake? Ask, what pattern am I refusing to confront? These questions do not erase pain. They give pain a direction. They force your mind to search for information instead of simply searching for someone to blame. A person who constantly asks, who is responsible for my suffering? He may remain focused on the past. A person who asks, what can I do now? Begins to reclaim power in the present. There is a difference between a question that creates understanding and a question that creates helplessness. Why am I like this can make your weaknesses feel permanent. What caused this pattern and how can I change it? Turns the problem into something that can be examined. Why am I not confident? May produce endless self-criticism. What actions would make me trust myself more? Creates a path forward. Your mind responds to the instructions you give it. If you ask it to find reasons why you cannot succeed, it will find them. There will always be obstacles, weaknesses, unfair circumstances, and reasons to delay. But if you ask your mind to find the next possible move, it begins searching for opportunities. The external world may remain exactly the same, yet your relationship relationship with it changes because your attention is now organized around action rather than defeat. This is especially important during moments of failure. Most people experience failure and immediately ask, "What is wrong with me?" The question attacks identity. It turns an event into a definition of the self. But a more useful question is, what exactly failed? Was it the strategy, the preparation, the timing, the decision, the effort, the information available at the time? When you ask precise questions, failure becomes specific. And when failure becomes specific, it becomes easier to correct. The same principle applies to relationships. Instead of asking, "Why do people always leave me?" ask, "What kind of people am I allowing into my life?" Instead of asking, "Why do I keep getting disrespected?" ask, "What behavior am I tolerating?" Instead of asking, "Why do I chase people who do not value me?" ask, "What am I trying to prove by pursuing someone unavailable?" These questions may be uncomfortable, but discomfort can reveal what excuses hide. The strongest question is often the simplest. What is within my control? When you are overwhelmed, this question separates reality from imagination. You may not control another person's opinion, but you can control your response. You may not control the past, but you can control what you learn from it. You may not control the timing of opportunity, but you can control whether you are prepared when it arrives. You may not control the behavior of others, but you can control who receives access to you. The quality of your questions determines the quality of the answers your mind searches for. Ask questions that make you a victim, and your mind will gather evidence of powerlessness. Ask questions that demand responsibility, and your mind will begin searching for choices, patterns, lessons, and opportunities. Every difficult moment contains multiple questions, and the question you choose determines which reality your mind will begin to investigate. Temporary emotions have destroyed more futures than many permanent obstacles ever could. A moment of anger can create an enemy. A moment of desperation can lead you back to someone who repeatedly harmed you. A moment of fear can make you abandon an opportunity that might have changed your life. A moment of loneliness can make you accept treatment you once promised yourself you would never tolerate. The emotion may last for minutes, but the consequences of the decision can remain for years. This is why one of the most important forms of self-control is learning to separate what you feel now from what you should decide permanently. The emotional mind wants immediate relief. When you are angry, it wants to release the anger. When you are hurt, it wants someone else to feel the pain. When you are lonely, it wants immediate connection. When you are afraid, it wants to escape. The mind focuses on the present feeling and ignores the future consequences. But the disciplined person learns to ask a different question. What will this decision cost me when this emotion disappears? That question creates distance between impulse and action. You may still feel anger, but you no longer allow anger to become your commander. You may still feel sadness, but you do not let sadness decide your entire future. You may still feel fear, but you refuse to confuse fear with a prediction of what will happen. Imagine receiving a message that deeply angers you. Your first instinct may be to respond immediately. You begin writing words designed to hurt the other person. In that moment, the response feels justified. Your mind tells you that you must defend yourself. But emotions change. Hours later, the anger may be gone while the message you sent remains. The person may forgive you or they may not. The relationship may change permanently because of a decision made during a temporary emotional storm. The same pattern appears in ambition. You begin a goal with excitement, but after several weeks, the excitement disappears. The work becomes repetitive, progress becomes slow. You feel frustrated and begin thinking that perhaps the goal was never meant for you. Many people quit at this point. They mistake the temporary emotion of discouragement for permanent evidence that they chose the wrong path. But feelings are not always reliable judges of long-term decisions. The fact that you feel tired does not mean your goal is wrong. The fact that you feel uncertain does not mean you are incapable. The fact that you feel discouraged does not mean you should quit. Sometimes the emotion is simply the natural resistance that appears when something requires discipline. You must learn to experience emotions without immediately acting on them. This does not mean suppressing your feelings or pretending they do not exist. Suppression gives emotions hidden power. Awareness gives you choice. You could say, "I am angry, but I do not have to respond while I am angry." You can say, "I feel lonely, but I do not have to contact the person who repeatedly disrespected me." You can say, "I feel afraid, but I can still take the next step." The ability to pause is a form of power. Most people are easy to control because their reactions are predictable. Push the right button and they become angry. Withdraw attention and they become desperate. Offer praise and they become obedient. Create fear and they abandon their principles. Their emotions become levers that other people can pull whenever they want. When you learn to pause, you become more difficult to manipulate. You give yourself time to observe what is happening instead of becoming part of the chaos. A pause may last 10 seconds, an hour, an entire day. The length is not important. What matters is that you create a space in which your emotions can settle before your decisions become permanent. The most dangerous decisions are often made when you are trying to escape discomfort. You quit because you want to stop feeling frustrated. You send the message because you want to stop feeling ignored. You return to the past because you want to stop feeling lonely. You give up because you want to stop feeling uncertain. But temporary relief can create long-term pain. The stronger choice is often to tolerate the feeling without allowing it to control your direction. You do not need to solve every emotion immediately. Some emotions need to be experienced, understood, and allowed to pass. When you stop treating every uncomfortable feeling as an emergency, you become become more patient with yourself and more strategic with your decisions. Before making a decision that could change your relationships, career, goals, or future, ask yourself whether you would make the same decision if you were calm. If the answer is no, wait. Let the emotional storm pass. The decision may still be the right one, but it should survive the disappearance of the emotion that first created it. The way you speak to yourself quietly shapes the limits of your life. Long before the world decides what it thinks of you, you are already giving yourself instructions about what you can attempt, what you should avoid, and what you are capable of becoming. Every repeated sentence in your mind has influence. When you constantly tell yourself, I am weak, I always fail, I am not good enough, or people like me never succeed, these words begin to feel less like opinions and more like facts. Eventually, you stop questioning them. You begin making decisions that protect the identity you have created through your own language. This is why your inner dialogue matters so much. The mind listens to repetition. If you repeatedly describe yourself as incapable, your mind begins searching for evidence of incapability. Every mistake becomes confirmation. Every rejection becomes proof. Every difficulty becomes a reason to stop. You may not even realize that the real obstacle is no longer the situation in front of you, but the story you've been repeating about yourself. A person who says, I am not disciplined, may begin to believe that discipline is something other people possess, but they never can. A person who says, I am bad with money, may continue making careless financial decisions because the statement has become part of their identity. A person who says, I am socially awkward, may avoid conversations and opportunities, then use that avoidance as evidence that they truly cannot connect with people. The language creates the expectation, and the expectation influences the behavior. But this does not mean you should lie to yourself with empty positive statements. Telling yourself that you are perfect when you know you have weaknesses creates another form of denial. The goal is not to replace reality with fantasy. The goal is to describe reality accurately without turning temporary conditions into permanent identities. Instead of saying, I am a failure, say, I have failed at something. There is a difference. The first statement turns an event into an identity. The second keeps the event in its proper place. Instead of saying, I cannot do this, say, I have not learned how to do this yet. Instead of saying, I am not disciplined, say, my current habits are undisciplined. Instead of saying, I always make terrible decisions, say, I have repeated a pattern that I need to understand. Precise language creates psychological freedom. If the problem is part of your identity, it feels permanent. If the problem is a behavior, a habit, or a pattern, it can be changed. You may not be able to change everything instantly, but you can begin changing the instructions you give your mind. Pay attention to the words you use after making a mistake. Do you attack yourself, or do you analyze the mistake? Do you say, I am stupid, or do you ask, what did I fail to understand? The first response creates shame. The second creates information. Shame often makes people hide from their weaknesses. Information allows them to confront and improve them. Your inner language also influences how you respond to difficulty. If you say, this is impossible, your mind begins looking for reasons to stop. If you say, this is difficult, but what is the next step? Your attention moves toward action. The situation may not have changed, but your position within the situation has changed. One sentence closes the door. The other begins searching for a way through. Many people speak to themselves in ways they would never speak to someone they love. They make one mistake and call themselves worthless. They experience rejection and declare themselves unlovable. They face a setback and decide their entire future is ruined. Then they wonder why they lack confidence. Confidence cannot survive constant internal destruction. This does not mean you should protect yourself from every uncomfortable truth. Sometimes you need to confront your weaknesses directly. But confrontation is different from self-destruction. A strategist studies a weakness in order to strengthen it. A defeated person uses the weakness as proof that improvement is impossible. Begin listening to your inner language as if someone else were speaking. Notice the words you repeat. Notice the predictions you make. Notice how quickly you turn one mistake into a permanent conclusion. Then begin replacing vague, destructive statements with precise observation. You are not your worst day. You are not every mistake you have made. You are not the opinion of the person who rejected you. You are not permanently trapped inside the habits you currently possess. The mind accepts repeated language as instruction, so be careful what you tell yourself when nobody else is listening. Every sentence is shaping the identity from which your future decisions will be made, and the person you become is often built quietly through the words you repeat when you are alone. The person you are today is not the final version of who you can become. Yet many people make decisions as if their current weaknesses are permanent. They say, this is just who I am, when what they really mean is, this is the pattern I have repeated for a long time. They confuse familiarity with identity. Because they have been impatient for years, they believe they are simply an impatient person. Because they have avoided difficult situations, they believe they are naturally weak. Because they have repeatedly chased approval, they assume they will always need the permission of others to feel valuable. But identity is not something carved into stone. It is reinforced through repetition. Every decision teaches your mind something about who you are. When you keep promises to yourself, you become someone who trusts your own word. When you choose discipline over temporary comfort, you become someone who can tolerate discomfort. When you remain calm instead of reacting impulsively, you begin to see yourself as a person with control. The transformation does not happen because you suddenly feel like a completely different person. It happens because your actions begin creating evidence of a new identity. This is why you must learn to think like the person you are becoming. The current version of you will often want immediate comfort. The future version may require patience. The current version may want to respond to every insult. The future version may understand that not every battle deserves attention. The current version may want to return to familiar habits. The future version may recognize that familiarity is not the same as progress. When faced with a decision, most people ask, what do I feel like doing? This question gives temporary emotion control over long-term direction. A better question is, what would the person I am becoming do? This question forces you to think beyond the present moment. It reminds you that every choice is shaping the person you will eventually become. Suppose you want to become disciplined, but you feel tired. The current version of you says, skip it today. The person you are becoming asks, what would a disciplined person do when motivation disappears? Suppose you want to become confident, but you feel afraid. The current version says, avoid the situation. The future version asks, what action would teach me to trust myself? Suppose you want to become independent, but you feel lonely. The current version wants to chase anyone who offers attention. The future version asks, will this choice strengthen my self-respect or weaken it? These questions change the meaning of everyday decisions. A small action becomes more than a small action. It becomes evidence. Every time you resist an impulse, you strengthen your ability to resist the next one. Every time you complete something difficult, you create proof that you can endure difficulty. Every time you choose long-term growth over immediate comfort, you become more aligned with the person you claim you want to be. You do not need to become perfect before you begin thinking differently. In fact, waiting to feel transformed is one of the ways people remain unchanged. They say, when I become confident, I will act confidently. But confidence often comes after action, not before it. You act despite uncertainty, and the action creates evidence. The evidence slowly changes your belief about yourself. The same principle applies to courage. You do not wait until fear disappears. You act while fear is present. Each time you do this, your mind learns that fear does not have absolute authority. Eventually, the situation that once seemed impossible becomes familiar. What once required enormous effort becomes part of your character. This is how identity is built, not through dramatic declarations, but through repeated choices made when nobody is watching. The world may not notice that you chose silence instead of reacting. It may not know that you resisted an old habit, kept a promise, or continued working when you felt discouraged. But your mind notices. It records the evidence. Over time, these choices create a new internal story. You begin to say, I'm someone who follows through. I'm someone who can remain calm. I'm someone who does not need to chase approval. I'm someone who can endure discomfort. The identity follows the behavior. So when you face your next decision, do not ask only what feels easiest. Ask what direction the decision is taking you. Ask whether it is strengthening the person you want to become or feeding the version of yourself you are trying to outgrow. Every thought you entertain, every reaction you control, every habit you repeat, and every difficult choice you make is casting a vote for a future identity. And eventually the person you repeatedly choose to become will no longer feel like a distant goal, but the natural result of the life you have been building.